all, it will probably come through very quickly, and we have to be ready to mobilise. And there are groups all over the country already campaigning as we are on neutrality, and we have all worked together in the past, and we will do so again. But this evening's meeting is about getting the Neutrality League up and running, with more activists getting involved. We need help with things like social media, giving out leaflets, all the usual fundraising. So we're hoping that there'll be some of you at the end of this evening's meeting ready to volunteer and to get involved as well. So I'm going to leave it there and just introduce our speakers. And the format, for anybody who hasn't been at one of our public meetings before, the format is we hear from the speakers, and then we'll hand it over to all of you for comments, short comments, and hopefully questions, if you have any questions about the technicalities of the triple lock or neutrality, or even if you just have questions about how to get involved, or if you have suggestions about things that we might do, there'll be time for all of that, and then the speakers will all come back at the end in response to any direct questions. So we have a mixture of in-person and online speakers this evening. So I'm just going to call out all the speakers, and then we'll get started. So our first speaker here this evening is Rory Rowan, who is a political geographer in Trinity College Dublin, and I think Rory is going to be focusing on explaining the triple lock and explaining exactly what the government is planning to do. Our second speaker then will be joining us online, and that's Yanis Varoufakis. Most of you will know of Yanis, economist, former Greek Minister for Finance, and he's currently the Secretary General of GM25, and he'll be talking about Ireland's neutrality in an EU context. Then our second speaker in the room is Bana Abu Zalouf, who is a PhD candidate in international law in Maynooth, and she'll be talking about Palestine and connecting Palestine and the issue of Irish neutrality, anti-imperialism, and what's been happening in Gaza. And then our final online speaker will be Richard Wolff, US economist, and he'll be talking about neutrality in the context of US empire, which obviously is headline news these days. And then our final speaker here in the room this evening will be Jenny Maguire, columnist, campaigner, and the former president of the Students' Union in Trinity. And Jenny will be talking to us about mobilising and campaigning. So that's it from me for now, and our first speaker is Rory.
Hi everybody, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for having me, Diane, for inviting me, and for all of you for being here tonight on such a miserable evening. And we're here to try and make sure that Ireland and the world doesn't get more miserable with what the Philippines and all government are up to. So Mark and others involved now have asked me to kind of basically set the scene, explain the triple lock, and discuss the government's plans, and I'll do a little bit of contextualising of that and outlining some of the stakes of what is involved. So what is the triple lock? The triple lock, before we get into the technicalities, is the core of Irish neutrality, which has been a central part of Irish foreign policy since independence. Now, neutrality is not in the Constitution. That's been very important. Some people still think it's in the Constitution. Neutrality is not in the Constitution, and the triple lock is the key piece of legislation that holds neutrality within the Irish state. And the triple lock is essentially, it governs the deployment of Irish troops overseas, but it's very important to understand it's not just about troop deployments, it's about the centrality of neutrality in our state system. So the origins of the triple lock lie in the Defence Amendment Act of 1960. So they really go back a very long way, it's over 60 years at this point. But the phrase and the term the triple lock was introduced in the early 2000s when the Irish people were asked to vote in referendums, first on the Nice Treaty in 2001 and then the Lisbon Treaty in 2008. And in both of those referendums, Irish people voted against further EU integration because there was a worry that that integration would involve heightened EU militarisation and the formation of something like an EU army. And in both cases, the Irish government of the day came back to the public and said, that's not the right answer. We will give you guarantees that Ireland will not be part of any EU militarisation, and was asked to vote again. And the Irish public voted On the basis of that guarantee, again, in 2002 and 2009, the Nice to Lisbon to take part and support further EU integration on the basis that we would not be part of any military integration. So there's been a democratic vote twice through referendums that the people of Ireland have voted to, and they're trying to basically ignore those votes and push ahead with legislation in an undemocratic and authoritarian fashion. So what does the triple lock say? The triple lock, and this is a key point, come back to it, the triple lock commits Ireland to UN peacekeeping and no other form of military exercise of our troops overseas, to UN peacekeeping. Now the specifics of it, it says that no more than 12 troops shall take part in overseas missions unless three requirements are met, and those are decision by the government of the day, a majority vote in the Dáil, and a UN mandate. And that UN mandate can come from the United Nations Security Council, or it can come from the United Nations General Assembly. So what the government, what are they planning to do? And they're pushing forward what is called the Defence Amendment to a Bill 2025. And essentially this aims to scrap the triple lock. It's passed pre-legislative scrutiny, so it passed through the Joint Committee on the Oireachtas on Defence and National Security, a new Oireachtas committee formed last year, or started last year, and the Dáil vote is promised for early 2026. We don't know, any of us, hopefully, maybe someone might know more about this, when that will be, but it's expected that that will be early this year, very soon, the next couple of months, and certainly before Ireland takes over the EU presidency in the summer. And many of you will have, of course, seen this was a lot in the news this week because Cabinet gave their approval to the legislation on Tuesday. Right? So what does that bill propose? And it proposes two things. There's two elements to this. One is to remove the triple lock, to remove the requirement for a UN mandate to send Irish troops overseas to take part in missions. It's being called the double lock. The double lock is no lock. The triple lock is a misnomer. There's one lock, which is the UN, right? And that is being removed. That's what they want to remove. And that means that the government of the day, with a Dáil majority, can decide on the foreign policy and military affairs and taking part in wars and military operations overseas. Right? And the second thing, and this is important, is about troop numbers, that less maybe talked about, that the number of 12 troops that was needed in the triple lock, if more than 12 troops were to be sent overseas, we had to have a UN mandate. That's going to be removed to 50 troops and no UN mandate. And this essentially means that the Irish Minister of Defence and government of the day can send up to 50 troops to take part in overseas mission without a Dáil vote, and over 50 will involve a Dáil vote, a government pledge, but no UN mandate. So what's the reasoning behind this? The government say that the triple lock is no longer fit for purpose because the United Nations Security Council is dysfunctional and no longer fit for purpose. They claim that Russia and China have a vote over Irish troops deploying overseas and taking part in US peacekeeping. They say that Russia and China are preventing Ireland from getting involved in peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping. And occasionally, sometimes someone will say, oh, it's not just Russia and China, it's the US as well. They're concerned about that. This is not true. This is lies, direct lies. There has been no vote exercised by any of the members of the Security Council on UN peacekeeping since 1999, and indeed that was China. They voted against, this is before the triple lock, before the Nice and Lisbon Treaty, to stop the extension of an existing peacekeeping mission to Macedonia. You remember last year that the US led the refusal of an extension of a mandate for US peacekeeping in southern Lebanon, UNIFIL, where Ireland has been, it's not only Ireland's longest commitment to standing solid commitment to UN peacekeeping, but any nations in the world in the history of UN peacekeeping has been Ireland's participation in UNIFIL. The US scrapped it, and China and Russia voted for it. See what you mean, or think what you may about that. But the other important point here is not just that it's lies about the veto, that the General Assembly can also provide a UN mandate for peacekeeping. So it's not just about the UN Security Council. The government are lying and they're distracting with this. So what's at stake in this? The triple lock, as I said, is the final thread, the legal protection for neutrality in our government system. And if it was scrapped, and this happens, there'll be a fundamental shift in the nature of the Irish state. This is essentially a counter-revolution being led by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to reverse and get rid of the anti-imperial legacy that lies, for what it's worth, in this state. They'll break with the tradition of Irish foreign policy, where we don't fight imperial wars and we don't involve ourselves with imperial alliances. God, 1 minute. I thought I'd time myself as well. So, I'll get to the key parts. The triple lock recognises the UN as the legitimate authority and the only legitimate authority to have a say over peacekeeping. The triple lock has meant that Irish military operations are only about UN peacekeeping. The government debate, as they have it, is all about who gets to make that decision. Russia and China vetoing on the UN Security Council. This is a distraction from the question of who is important, but this is a distraction from the question of what type of missions. It's not just about who gets to decide whether Ireland engages in peacekeeping under the UN. It's about missions of other sorts that are not UN peacekeeping. So if you take one message from what I say, it'd be this: scrapping the triple lock means that Irish troops can be moved, and they are being moved, from US peacekeeping to fighting wars and conducting pacification programs under the EU, the OSCE and NATO. And in the legislation that's being pushed forward, they say the EU, they say USCE and other regional alliances. They do not say NATO, because they know if they say NATO, people will be like, we don't want to join NATO. So they just don't say that, and they continue on to have us participate in missions led by NATO. The purpose of the government bill is to free Irish military, Irish troops, and Irish foreign policy up from the UN. It's to separate from the UN and embrace EU and NATO militarization. That is the purpose of it. It's not the byproduct or potentiality, it is the purpose. And we might think here about who gets to define what peace is. They're saying we will take part in military operations led by the EU and NATO overseas, but they will be in keeping with the UN Charter. Well, why, if they're in keeping with the UN Charter, would you not do it under the UN? Right? The institution which sets that charter and sets the terms of that. They're evoking here that there will be peacekeeping and peace management. We might think of the erosion of the meaning of peace, which is decades in the making. You know, the last 2 weeks we've had Trump's Board of Peace, which was initially meant to be about Gaza, disgustingly, and now it's even more about the globe. This is what's happening. This is part of a broader tendency and movement, picking up an enormous pace to get rid of the United Nations as the seat of diplomacy and get rid of international law as the regulations that govern our world. And the Irish government, by seeking to get rid of the triple lock, is participating in that. It is taking part in a move away from the United Nations and international law into a West-based order where the West gets to say what, right? And I'm going to skip past a few things just in the interest of time. And the other thing, you know, about this, many things to say, but other people will talk about the context. There's another stake here, that this is about a massive shift on wealth and our public wealth away from investment in social crises, in health, in housing, in mental health, the climate, which we're doing nothing about, in order to put that money into military defense and security and line the pockets of military arms companies from around the world. And we have lobbyists here involving senior academics who are having monthly meetings with the government, the Ministry of Defence. They're involved with the Irish Defence Forces, brokering deals for the likes of Lockheed Martin, the biggest arms company in the world. This is a massive fiddle. We're being told there's threats against us that are not real threats, and they want to take our tax money, the money that should be invested in our communities and our people, and putting it into the pockets of arms companies. That's what this is about. So thank you very much for your time.
Hi everyone. Thank you everyone.
Thanks, Rory, and hopefully you'll have some questions for Rory in the Q&A. So our next speaker is, I think you're online. Janice, can you hear me? Hello. Welcome to our meeting. There's a packed room here in Dublin, and we're looking forward to hearing you talk about what's happening at EU level and how this attack on Ireland's neutrality is connected to the militarisation project that's currently underway in the EU. So you have about 10 minutes, so take it away.
What's that?
So we're actually struggling with the audio here. If you'll just give us a minute to work it out. In other words,
Thanks, everybody.
Hopefully this doesn't take too long to solve.
You try speaking there just for a second?
No. It's just some audio issues.
Still not? Just tell them to say something.
No. Thanks, everybody.
So can you all hear me without a microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. So while we're waiting to...
Sorry. Excuse me.
Can you hear me now? You can? We have a miracle? We have sound?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah. Just say yes to somebody needs to.
You mean I can start speaking? Yes?
Sarah, get up there. No,
Nice to meet you, folks. So, thank you for having me. Notwithstanding technical issues, let me start with a message to all of you. You must be very proud of your triple lock, in the same way that the whole world is proud of the position that Iran has taken, more or less collectively, on the Palestinian question, on the Palestinian genocide. But let me address this issue from a perspective of, a European Union perspective focusing on economic matters. Now, in 2023-2024, the German government released an app on phones, an app that helps you, perhaps German citizens or residents, locate their nearest bunker. As part of a program for making, and this is the official government expression, war cable. A heavy 2-page pamphlet entitled If Crisis or War Comes was published. Now, what's going on? What is going on? Well, let me tell you what's going on. Volkswagen can no longer sell cars because for the last 18, 19 years, there's been zero net investment in German or European industry. Net investment, right? If you take new investment away from investment which is necessary to upkeep capital stock, you have net investment. That was always negative for the last 18, 19 years. So they can't sell cars because they're not competitive anymore. They're not competitive with BYD, the Chinese ones, with Tesla and so on and so forth. So they're passing on their production lines to Rheinmetall to produce tanks that no one really needs, not even the Ukrainians. Essentially what we have is the complete collapse of any sense of a European investment program. You will recall that after the Euro crisis, which is primarily responsible for the fact that we have had negative net investment for so many years, there was a hope, not for me, but for many people, of the so-called Green Deal. Remember 2019, Ursula von der Leyen steps in with the Green Deal. She was going to spend, not she, but the European Union was going to spend 1 trillion euros on the green transition. That's 1,000 billion. Of that, do you know how much was spent on the green transition as a real investment, new investment? 29 billion. Not 1,000 billion, 29 billion. And then we had the pandemic. And that debacle with the so-called Next Generation EU or Recovery Fund, which was effectively a gift to the oligarchs that didn't end up boosting investment yet. So there's a new game in town, a new investment program. Armaments. The European Union has made it absolutely clear that the only growth model now in the European Union is the arms trade. Production, manufacturing, and purchase of weaponry. Rheinmetall going to bed with Leonardo, with British Aerospace, with Airbus and so on, to procure the capital goods that are meant to kill people, that were supposedly drag the European Union out of its stagnation. Now, there's a problem with military Keynesianism, this is what I call it. Well, actually, there are a number of problems. Setting aside the questions of war and peace, of pacifism, of, do we want the European Union to become a war project? I mean, it was sold to us, it was sold to the Irish people, the Greek people, as a peace project, remember? Some time ago. Well, the problem with military Keynesianism is, firstly, you need to have a common treasury department in order to fund the bloody thing, right? We don't, unlike the United States or the Russians. Secondly, you have to have the War Department, this is what Trump calls the Defense Department, and that's good. You can see that Airbus and the company that makes the Rafale jets are clashing with the Germans. They can't even organize an escape from a brown paper bag. But even, let's say that we set all this aside and we create the framework. The military Keynesian multiplier accelerator doesn't work. It needs to be a constant investment like the United States. But for the United States, the Pentagon has a $1 trillion budget. It's an investment program for the macroeconomy of the United States. But the problem with military Keynesianism, even when it works as it does in the United States, is that you end up very quickly with warehouses full of ammunition. And these need to be depleted in order to restock. That's why the United States has been having a war every 6 months, every 8 months, in order to empty the warehouses. So is this what they are proposing? And let's say that we do all that. Who is going to be sending men and women to war? Ursula von der Leyen, she doesn't have the legitimacy even to mind her own office. Nobody voted for her. Is it President Macron? He cannot even control his own government. Is it Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany? He cannot control his Bundestag, his parliament. So it is a complete catastrophe, even if you wanted military Keynesianism, right? So this warmongering is essential for them to pretend that they are doing it. And the more of our countries that drag into this warmongering exercise, the longer they can keep up their pretense that this is a growth model for the European Union. Now, let me come to a few points regarding Ukraine, because this is where it all starts, isn't it? They're telling you that you are freeloaders, that you are not pulling your weight to help the Ukrainians free themselves. Well, what exactly is the European Union and the NATO plan for Ukraine? Do they have a plan to win the war? Because they have no plan for peace. You remember, every time some of us talked about a ceasefire, we were always called Putin's handmaidens. When we said that, look, in response to the argument that, Putin is the new Hitler. This is what they're telling us, isn't it? Or have been telling us now, since 2022. Look, I'm not going to dispute that. I don't believe it, but this is not the issue. Because my point is, if Vladimir Putin is the new Hitler, why are we not sending troops there to fight Russia and take over Moscow and push him into a bunker and have him commit suicide or drag him to Nuremberg trial? We're sending weaponry to the Ukrainians to do what? To defeat Russia? That is impossible. There is simply no scenario under which the Ukrainians with NATO weaponry can defeat Russia. So essentially, all they're doing is they are prolonging the massacre of Ukrainians and Russians in a First World War-like trench warfare with drones and AI equipment. Why? In order to maintain some kind of narrative that will help Rheinmetall take over Volkswagen factories, so that the Volkswagen factories that would have shut down otherwise because of lack of investment can now produce Leopard tanks. The fact that the people of Ireland are refusing to be part of this travesty, of this tragic farce, is a great testimony to the Irish people. You should never succumb to that. Your greatest contribution is that you're not participating in this huge lie. Here in Greece, we are part of NATO. By the way, anybody who tells you that NATO is a kind of alliance of democracies, allow me to offer my own personal experience. I grew up in this country. I was raised in this country. It was a NATO country, and it was a fascist country. So anybody who tells me that NATO equals democracy, especially speaks against my own DNA, my own tradition. So, friends, comrades, stay the hell out of NATO. Keep your triple lock. Fight tooth and nail to maintain a tradition that makes Ireland a shining example of what it means to be properly solidaristic to peoples who are suffering invasion, who are suffering from war. Stick to the United Nations even while our leaders are going into bed with Donald Trump to wreck the United Nations and to replace it with something like the British East India Company, because this is what the Board of Peace is. It's a corporation belonging to oligarchs that are going to make warmongering to turn into an art form. My 10 minutes are over. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Yanis. I hope you get perspective here this evening, and we're certainly trying very hard and will be trying even harder to protect our neutrality and our triple lock. So our next speaker is Bana, who is a PhD candidate in Maynooth, and most people in this room will have been involved in the Palestine Solidarity movement, not just in the last few years, but over many years. And I think part of the reason neutrality is so important to so many people in Ireland is because it's part of the anti-imperialist tradition. It's not just about what's happening in the EU. It's also part of our stance against imperialism. And I think what's been happening in Gaza in the last couple of years is the greatest example of colonialism and the murder that has happened, live streamed on our screens. And I think we have to start connecting up more than we have been the fight to defend and insist on freedom for Palestine and the fight against militarism and war here at home. So Bana is hopefully going to tie some of those issues together for us. No pressure, Bana.
Thank you to the previous speakers. As both of them have pointed, we're actually living in very Orwellian times where war is becoming sort of dressed as peace and aggression is dressed as defense. And of course you've mentioned the Board of Peace, and must I remind you that a person on the Board of Peace, the genocider himself, Netanyahu, is on the Board of Peace, right? So you can see the banality of the concept itself. But language is important, so I want to note a little bit on language, right? So we're hearing a little bit of this, this language about peace coming a lot, peacekeeping. So I want to clarify why I want to, point at this peacekeeping mention in the sort of new amendment to the legislation. So basically the Irish government is stressing this sort of scrapping of the triple lock as a removal of the obstacle to peacekeeping, right? The obstacle is a UN mandate, and peacekeeping, I will explain to you the definition of peacekeeping. So peacekeeping is actually a practice developed in the UN system. So it's not divorced from the UN. And it's based on three things. First, it's based on consent of parties. So you cannot engage in peacekeeping in a country that opposes your presence there. Second, impartiality. So you cannot just do it out of your own self-interest. So you cannot do it because you want to maybe get something out of it for personal reasons. The third one is the non-use of force. So you cannot use force. So international law, since I'm an expert in international law, under the UN Charter, you can only use force with two exceptions. The first one is when you're using it for self-defense. So you can justify the use of force for self-defense. The second one is when you have a UN Security Council mandate. So that is international law. So you cannot use force against any other territory, or actually, in fact, be in any other territory against the territorial integrity and the political independence of any state without that mandate. So whether this government thinks that this removal of the UN mandate makes any sense, it doesn't. So the question again is, what is peacekeeping here? What is meant here by in the Irish government sort of understanding of peacekeeping? So again, I must remind you that peacekeeping is meant to operate within a multilateral legal framework in the UN. It cannot operate without the UN, okay? So I also need to clarify that peace enforcement is not the same as peacekeeping. Let me give you an example. Peace enforcement is used when you actually use force, and it is required that you have a UN mandate. And maybe an example of that is the situation in Mali, for example. So you have this idea that we need to use military force in order to prevent future military force, which is, banal, of course, but this is why, of course, you need a UN mandate. So again, so you have to, so this idea that this government is, trying to continue its peacekeeping but is prevented from it is actually very misleading. So what is happening really is the Irish government is actually wanting to collapse this distinction between peacekeeping and peace enforcement. Two different things, right? And this is very dangerous. And must I remind you, by the way, that peace is also very subjective. So Macron's idea of peace can be so different than the Western Sahara's idea of peace, right? So the idea that, you know, the government can say and they are doing peacekeeping can be understood differently because it's very subjective. But in international law, it's not very subjective. And who decides it? The UN. So just because the Irish government wants to sort of change that meaning, it does not mean that it can do so. I can give, of course, countless examples to you today of historical examples or modern examples where this sort of idea of peacekeeping has been sort of misused or abused, if we may say. So we can say some humanitarian interventions were actually in reality military interventions. Some so-called responsibility to protect actions by states were also military interventions and were used as a force. So again, so this idea that the Irish government is doing peacekeeping can be very questionable if there's no UN mandate. So what is the Irish government is doing right now? They're trying to manufacture consent, basically. And how they're doing so? They're doing so basically through the idea of what I call peace washing, right? They are trying to present themselves as keeping the tradition of Irish peacekeeping. Of course, they give the example of the UNIFIL, but that's not really what they're doing. They're trying basically to remove the triple lock, move into militarization, and to have more so an offensive foreign policy. But how are they manufacturing consent? So there's this concept called the military industry media academy complex. And so that's how they're doing it. We have the military, of course, industries. I think Yanis mentioned it. I'm just going to mention one example for each because of time. One is, we just realized in Maynooth that there's this company, a Japanese company, that creates robotics called Fanuc. And this company actually makes robotics that Elbit system used to create weapons, basically. So this company is now based in Maynooth. They have their bases in Maynooth, and they're complicit, of course, in the genocide in Palestine. Mind you, of course, all military, industry is somewhat complicit. The second one is the media. I mean, we've seen tens of articles where they were trying to manufacture consent for this sort of peace washing, but also the removal of the triple lock. We have a threat from Russia. We need to protect ourselves. We need to spend more on defense, and we're, the same as Yanis was mentioning. We're just kind of, using the power of the EU, and we're not participating, etc. And then we have the academic one as well. So let me tell you an example. So the head of the Irish University Association previously used to be the deputy representative of NATO. And so that's a new president. And he also used to be the British ambassador of Ireland. And what else has been happening in the academic world as well? We have Research Ireland increasing their defense research budget. So I don't think we can see all of that as coincidental. It's all working together to manufacture consent for the militarization, for the removal of the triple lock, etc. And all of them have in common one thing: complicity in the genocide in Palestine, right? The academia, all of it, complicity in the genocide of Palestinians. So instead of actually ending the complicity, Ireland decided to answer to the Palestine solidarity community with actually consolidating their complicity. That is the truth. So interestingly, if I were actually to debunk at least the media element of it, I would actually point out to the fact that actually the biggest threat to Ireland has been actually Israel, because they've killed Irish people. They've killed UNIFIL members. There's a specific name, I forgot to write it here, but somebody was killed. And also, they've always been targeting the Irish troops on the border. So, and the second thing, of course, the fact that the U.S. uses Ireland Shannon Airport as as an air base for its military should be questionable. Maybe that should be seen as the main threat. I would be worried about my sovereignty from these two than I would be worried about Russia. So, the end. I'd like to just mention that. To be honest, I think one of the things that reminds me of Ireland, and I think Janice mentioned it very well, is Ireland's anti-colonial and sort of solidarity with the oppressed. The moment this triple lock is removed, this is a stain on Irish history, Irish legacy. There's no way back from there. There's no way back. For many people in Ireland, this means, of course, sending your kids, sending your own people to fight for these wars. But for us, Palestinians, for us people who are the ones that mostly are going to be the target of this, we are going to be the ones bearing the brunt of this. So it's not just simply that you're fighting for yourselves and your sovereignty and neutrality, you're also fighting not to have blood on your hands. That's very central. And so once Ireland decides to sell their soul to this bloodthirsty, war-hungry, imperialist order, there's no way back. Ireland actually becomes indefensible. And so I'd like to just end on us just rethinking what it means to actually do this, not just for us in Ireland here today, but what does it mean for us, for all the people that we stood by, the oppressed people in the world, including Palestinians. Thank you.
Thanks, Bana. So our next speaker, I'm not sure if he's online. Oh.
Hi everyone, thank you everybody.
Yeah, no, he sent a message to say he's trying to get into the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're working on it.
You're working on it. Thank you. Okay. Well, are you okay? Yeah. So Jenny was supposed to be our last speaker and do a sort of a rallying call to get active, but we'll just have the rallying call a little bit early, and hopefully Richard will get in before the end of the meeting. So thanks, Jenny.
Thank you very much, and I already feel so riled up from Bana's contribution and Rory's as well, and Janice as well. When I was in secondary school, that's when Fridays for Future kicked off. That is when we had this feeling of an omnipresent hope that something could be different. I don't know if it was just because I was at secondary school or because I actually was made believe something. That the teachers, no matter what they were teaching, were talking about climate action. That the students, no matter what year they were in, didn't matter what their background was, they were also talking about climate action. The students who naturally organized and came together and got groups together so we could all go on the bus towards the main marches, we were talking about it. People in first year who had only been on a bus by themselves once or twice, who still felt the obligation to go and be brave and get that child's leave card and go out and go into town and march. Climate action felt inevitable if we just did something. Every day since then, I feel like I'm still on that bus to the march. Signs in people's bags, the smell of markers, the soft scribbling and some nervous anticipation. But the bus is still moving, and now I doubt if we'll ever get off, it feels like. I'm sure most people in this room have rarely been neutral on anything. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a room in Dublin right now that's more opinionated. But whether it's Palestine or the Congo or Sudan, when we see a world steadfast in its pursuit of persecution and suffering, we cannot help, at least in this space, to think about how we can stop it. It is why we organize, it is why we take direct action, and it is why we stand up for those who don't get the opportunity to. It is why we stay on that bus, even when the road is running out. Now is our moment to break that glass and finally arrive. The Finance Committee report on the militarization of the EU noted there is no standardized approach to the reporting military emissions in the European Union. It noted that the environmental effects of increased military expenditure and production have not been given due consideration, that every euro that goes towards military spending comes at a heavy cost to our climate. In 2019, it was estimated that militaries and its supply chains took up about 5.5% of all global emissions. Just for some context, that is more than the aviation industry, and that's more than the international aviation and shipping sectors combined. As we heard, these euros are not coming out of thin air. It is the social cohesion and society itself that is being taken for granted. Efforts are being made to maintain cohesion, not within society though, but between the rich and the powerful, and that they can stay together and that power can still be held. You and I are not in the conversation, just as the people of Palestine are not. Just like how the conversation has been shut down on climate, we are not worth talking to because we are being treated as collateral. We're being treated as fools that won't do anything. But if it is the future that they are willing to sacrifice to appease a world devoted to war, we know, and we have shown, Ireland can be different and we have to fight for it. It is our duty to meet the moment we face, not just for ourselves, but the very idea of peace, a real peace. Not a peace that is spun, not a peace that exists to maintain a global order that does not support every single person on this planet, but for a peace that we can get behind, for an idealized peace, for the radical idea that maybe things can be better, that we can come together and that we can do something better, that finally we can get off that bus and we can get off and we can march together, and that we can actually bring something forward. Because right now and every day when I look forward, I feel like I can't. I feel like what's the point in looking forward to a future when I'm unsure of whether it will still be there by the time I get to it. We must be felt on every single street. We must be felt at the doors. We must be felt we must be felt and heard as if our life depended on it, or if it was an election, whatever appeals to you best. Because we have to take it seriously. Because that's not what's happening. We are not meeting the moment as it currently stands. We must get to the point again and further, of which the issue of neutrality is not just something that people understand, but that people hold with them. That whether they're in their science class, whether they're getting the bus for the first time, that every single area of Irish life knows that this is a concern. It is a concern that affects them, and it is our duty and it is our right and our responsibility to come together and actually make it happen. Because we can demand better. We can believe in a country and a planet that can work differently. And we can believe and we can prove that it is shameful and nothing less than shameful to state otherwise. Peace is peace. Either you fight against it, no matter how it is, either you fight for it or you fight against it, no matter how the powerful try to reframe it. And now is our moment to press stop, finally. To press stop on the warmongering, to press stop of the sacrifice of so many people that they didn't sign up for, and to put a stop to everything, and just prove it, and prove we can do better, because what other choice do we have? Hear me like
Thanks, Jenny. Make you want to just go out with placards straight away. But do we have our last speaker? Yeah, we do. Okay, so Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, and I'm sorry you were experiencing some difficulties getting into the meeting. So, I don't know, we have a packed room here in Dublin, and you're our final speaker. So I've already introduced you, but I'll introduce you again. Richard Wolff is a US economist, and he's at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And Richard, you have 10 minutes to talk to us about US imperialism and how that might be connected to what we're fighting here in Ireland.
Okay, let me begin
by thanking you for the invitation. We need more solidarity across the Atlantic than we have, and a different kind. And your conference is exactly what we need and exactly the kind that we're hoping for. I am speaking to you from New York City, from Manhattan, where I live and work. I've been an economist in the United States all of my adult life. I was born here, and I will die here. I am here to tell you that the changes in the United States of the last few years have exceeded anything and everything radical political thinkers and activists had ever hoped to see. If I can impress anything on you, it's that all of your assumptions about the role of the United States as the global capitalist imperialist leader have now to be changed. The American empire is in an advanced state of decline, and we all know it. Please understand, the United States was defeated in Vietnam. It was defeated in Afghanistan. It was defeated in Iraq, and it is in the process of being defeated in the Ukraine. You can dance all around it, but that's the reality. The People's Republic of China, whatever you think about it, has demonstrated that economic development can happen faster and for a longer period of time than was possible in any Western country, including the United States. The dominance of the United States economically and politically is over. All that's left is military. And so that's where the emphasis has shifted. That's what Mr. Trump is about. Using the military, trying as best he can to slow the decline, because reversing it, they've given up. And what you see is the logical end point of all of this, which is a government characterized above all else by a profound level of desperation. If you're looking for a way to understand the herky-jerky nature of U.S. political statements, you need not look at the peculiar personality of Mr. Trump, although I invite you to do that. It's entertaining, if nothing else. But it is a far deeper problem. Mr. Trump can disappear. This problem will not. And the people who will come after him will be as desperate in similar ways as he has been. And that includes the Democratic political party, which is not an alternative other than different faces doing pretty much the same thing. Now, how does this affect all of you? All the assumptions, and I read the paper on the triple lock, and I follow your efforts there in Ireland, and I always have. The United States cannot provide what it used to provide to Europe. It has given up. All it wants from Europe now is tribute. Von der Leyen went to New York and Washington and agreed to tribute. If only the tariffs wouldn't be raised as high as they once were promised to be raised, well, in exchange, Europe would invest billions in the United States. So the more you participate in Europe, the more your taxes will be used to pay tribute to the United States. If you can't do that, the United States is not interested in your country or anything else about you. Will that threaten the alliance? They don't care. They're beyond that. They already know that that alliance is no match for what is coming from the Far East. Europe and America fought a war, now 4 years old, in Ukraine, and they were defeated. You can dance around it. I'm not endorsing neither Mr. Putin nor any of the others. That's not the point. The reality is the point. The United States is not worried about Russia. That peculiar politics is European. It's not America. Mr. Trump is looking to make deals with Mr. Putin. That's all. And if that comes at the expense of Europe, no one here cares. You've got to understand that, otherwise you will be making one analytical and political mistake after the other. The United States promised to protect Europe from the Soviet Union. That's what NATO was for. A deal was made. The United States is no longer interested in that deal. It doesn't feel threatened by Putin or the Russians, and for good reason. It's not willing to protect Europe anymore. You want protection? You'll have to pay for it yourself. You'll have to come up with the 5 or 6% of your national income to support a military. And you know where that's going to come from? It's going to come from the social welfare you've enjoyed for 50 years. It's going to be taken away from you. It's being taken away. Germany is borrowing to build its military. I know that the story you're told is that to protect you from Russia. If you pardon my English, that is what we call here bullshit. That defense development is to protect the people who run Europe from the Europeans who are going to be very angry in the years ahead as their social welfare is taken away from them. And they're going to need a military to keep the lid on that situation. I am speaking to you at a time when I am involved with others in organizing general strikes across the United States, now that the people of Minneapolis, Minnesota have shown us how to do it. The government of this country is busily sending troops into our cities, not against other people, against American people who are learning what I just told you about your situation applies pretty much to our own. The capitalist system has come to a major crisis point in the West. North America, Western Europe, Japan. It can't go on. It is being outcompeted at every level by China and the BRICS alliance that China has brilliantly organized. The United States lacks the power anymore to deal with it. It can brandish with desperation its military. But that is a very, very dangerous game to play, given that we've lost the last 5 wars we've tried to engage. If you want to know why in Venezuela the theatric for the television of snatching Mr. Maduro was the achievement, it's because we cannot invade that country. We don't have the ability, we can't sustain it, and if we can't do it in Venezuela, Who are you kidding? And you're talking about brandishing threats against others. Let me conclude with a piece of history. After the horrors of World War I, an effort was made, led by Europeans, to set up something called the League of Nations, to try to come up with better ways of resolving problems and difficulties than horrific wars. A few years later, 3 countries, among others, withdrew from the League of Nations. Germany was one, Italy was another, and Japan was still another. And very quickly, from the withdrawal from the League of Nations, we were pretty soon in, another catastrophic world war. At the end of that, we tried to do better and created the United Nations. Mr. Trump, in both his first term and now, is busily withdrawing from the United Nations. You are facing pressures, even though they may seem smaller by comparison, to remove the UN from playing a role in that triple lock system that Ireland organized. Don't do it. Don't abandon the UN, because it and the hope it represents will pay you back by abandoning you. We understand that in the United States, and the battle lines are being drawn here. I was born many years ago in the state of Ohio. It's right in the middle of the country. So let me conclude by telling you, we are closer to civil war in the United States, not only than I have ever experienced, but that I ever expected to see, ever. And I'm surrounded by people, if I could introduce you to them, who would tell you the same thing. This system is exhausted. It has let too many problems kicked down the road, not solved, postponed, and now they're all arriving pretty much at the same time, and you've got a government that clearly cannot handle it. But let me surprise you. It's not because they're awful people, although many of them are. That's really not the point. They're overwhelmed. Mr. Biden was overwhelmed. Kamala Harris, overwhelmed. They can't do it anymore. And they're desperate, and they can't admit it. We all know our empire is declining, but we just went through a presidential election in which neither Biden nor Harris nor Trump ever said one word about that. Denial is what we have. Don't let it infect your situation. By far, if you allow me the arrogance of suggesting to you what would be good for Ireland, you are heading into a storm. It's not of your making, of course not. But the big players in this game are gearing up for a final showdown. And this is becoming more and more an awareness, not just of a few people on the fringe, but of more and more of the average people who may not use the language I'm using, but who understand that something is terribly wrong in the United States. The government troops that killed Renee Good on the streets of Minneapolis past a point of no return. I don't even know if the Trump government can survive this. But it doesn't matter. It's got so many other unsolved problems crowding down on it. please be very, very careful. Neutrality in this situation will keep Ireland safer than any other course of action available to you. I wish I could tell you something else, but I can't. And please be aware that beside everything else, what you will not hear much about is that the left in America, of which I am a part, and proudly so, has never been stronger than it is now in my lifetime. The decline of the left from the high point it reached in the 1930s and 40s is finally, that decline is over. I live in New York City, now governed by a socialist mayor. Nearby, we have a dynamic socialist congresswoman, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who is another very important leader of a new socialism. It's a whole new generation of young people who are showing that the message of Bernie Sanders and many others is changing this country. My conclusion, I hope you understand you have more well-wishers and more allies here in the United States than you might have imagined. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Are Yanis and Richard still with us? Or are they... Richard is, okay. So thanks to all our speakers. I think the gravity of the situation is clear from all the, I think, the speeches tonight. But I think we have a few different battles to fight. The first one, I think, being defending the triple lock from the government attack on it, which is coming very soon. But I think, if I could just speak for myself before I hand it over to the floor, I think we have to, as well as talking about defending the triple lock and defending neutrality, I think we also have to not just talk about the triple lock, because most people, let's face it, don't understand the inner workings of the legislative process and all the details around the triple lock. But I think most people do understand that Ireland does not want to get involved in war. And I think most people would have an anti-war sentiment, and all the polls show that people generally are in favour of keeping our neutrality. So I think we need to do both things. I think we need to campaign to defend the triple lock, but at the same time broaden out the message to include a wider anti-war message that says really strongly that Ireland does not want to get involved in EU wars or any imperialist wars, and defending our neutrality is how we do that. So that's my proposal. So now we have some time for all of you to ask questions and make comments, but I would just like to make a plea, because I see a lot of familiar faces in this room, to not make statements that go on for a really long time, because that's why we had a panel of speakers who hopefully covered most of the issues. So I would ask you, given the time and the amount of people, and I think it would be brilliant to get as many voices as possible into the discussion, so I would ask you to keep your comments brief, and I welcome questions as well. So what we'll do is we'll take comments and questions from the speakers who are still here. We'll come back at the end. And I also think it would be just really good to make proposals for what we do next. We will be convening an activist group, hopefully, probably on Zoom, which is the most convenient. So we'll have a chance to get together again and start taking some actions. So I would encourage proposals as well as questions and really short comments. So if you want to say something, just put your hand up and I'll take you in the order that I see you. So I have Kieran over here and then the lady over here.
Kieran O'Sullivan, Irish Anti-War Movement. Very quickly, just to let everyone know, there is QR codes going around the room that you can use to donate to the Irish Neutrality League, and also there's a sum up here if you want to make a donation. If you haven't signed up, please do so. And my suggestion is that there's two by-elections coming up at the moment, and we need to make neutrality part of that. We need to campaign on it, we need to question TDs on it. We had a pledge a number of years ago for the Irish Anti-War Movement on people agreeing not to let US troops use Shannon. That similar thing should be held again. We need a referendum on neutrality. So thank you very much.
My name is Katrina. I just want to say that a couple of days ago, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock from 89 seconds to midnight to 85 seconds to midnight because of the threat of the geopolitical tensions, because of the threat of nuclear weapons, and because of climate change. And the only concrete thing I can think of now, having apart from thanking you for organising this and every single one of the speakers, is to ask everybody here before the price of stamps goes up to send a letter into the Irish Times editor and to ask him for fairness in the debate that they are writing. They are concentrating their efforts on this guy, Conor Gallagher, and he is quoting whoever talked about the academics for security and defence. He is quoting them as if they are an official body, and it really has to be stopped. That's all.
I have one sort of concrete suggestion, but just I want to make 2 points. One is, it beggars belief that this bill is going to be put before the Dáil when there is another bill there that has been there for ages, and that's the Occupied Territories Bill. It's not being prioritised. And the bottom line is, in relation to neutrality, it's not even just neutrality, it's the fact that what they want is they want Ireland to be able to participate in wars. And it's not just about peacekeeping, it's about peace enforcement, which is basically bombing the living daylights out of people so they can live in peace when they're already dead. It's a complete oxymoron. And the thing is that in relation to the neutrality issue, I think we have to point out, and this is a suggestion, I think, that what we should be doing is looking, there's two, Kieran mentioned about the by-elections. We really have to prioritise that at the by-elections. But I also think, because of a vote in the Dáil, you have independent, you look at the weakest links within the Dáil as regards getting the votes. So you have independents there, right? I think that their constituencies should be bombarded with a very clear message. What Ireland wants here, what the government wants, is to allow Ireland to participate in wars, resource wars, imperialist wars, wars without a UN mandate, and wars that are going to be killing people, and it's not a UN mission. And we have to point that out to people, and that's what we have to get. And in some of the constituencies where the independents are, I believe they are weak because they'll be worried about not getting re-elected, and if the government don't have the independents with them, they may not get the vote, because I know they will push this through, they've done it before. So with that and with the by-election, but I think the key thing is to undermine the coalition government with their backup independents.
Thanks a million. I'm going to stand up. Thanks a million to the speakers. They were amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think we have a huge battle on our hands here, and it really underlined by the speakers how important that battle is. And I think we shouldn't assume that we're going to lose that battle. We should think that we can win this battle. And we know the forces that are arrayed against us. If you open the Irish Times today, you'd be shocked to see the Irish Times view on removing the triple lock a necessary change. Don't fall over with shock. You've got the media, you've got all the political commentators, you've got the military, industrial, academic complex, as was explained, you've got the political establishment, you've got a lot of money. The one thing that we have on our side, in a way the only thing that we have on our side, but a very, very important thing that we have, is public opinion. opinion poll after opinion poll after opinion poll saying that people defend neutrality. But maybe more concretely than that, we just had an election. We just had a presidential election where the most important issue in the presidential election was neutrality. And the people elected, by an unprecedented margin, a candidate who spoke about the military-industrial complex. A candidate who was vilified for saying that we can't trust Britain, France, and the US. And a candidate who I think was a founding member of the Irish Neutrality League and was with us all the way in terms of trying to defend the triple lock. And I therefore think in our messaging, we need to be clear on saving our neutrality, saving the triple lock, but I think we need to bring to the fore the idea of let the people decide. You say we need to get rid of neutrality, the triple lock, or you say neutrality and we're getting rid of triple lock, but we're keeping neutrality, but it just doesn't mean anything anymore, is their argument. And that we need to have a mature debate. But we should say, let the people decide. And it just should become a mantra. Say the neutrality, let the people decide. And pressure and pressure and pressure to demand that you let the people decide. We disagree with you, fine, we have a debate with you, fine, but ultimately let the people decide. Because the people voted on this, they voted on it, it's in the Seville Declaration, it was part of the Nice Treaty, part of the Lisbon Treaty, people voted on it, and at the very least they need a right to have a vote on it if they're going to take it out. So I think we need to be mobilising outside of the Dáil, start of March, when this is likely to be coming through, with a message of save our neutrality, let the people decide.
Sorry, just before I take the next speaker, I think some people are starting to leave. If you want to get involved, we really want people to get involved. Make sure you've left your email address with us at the door there, and we'll be in touch about the next activist meeting. So a flurry of hands now, so I'm going to take Alice Mary first, and then yourself.
Yeah, just to add a couple of points on what we've heard. We've heard about how they try to kind of shift what peacekeeping means. I think it was so powerful. But in the bill itself, it actually doesn't just try and change what peacekeeping means. It adds another reason that you can engage in this overseas military activity, which is strengthening international security. A vague phrase, it doesn't even bother mentioning peace. It's literally strengthening whose security? Is it the security of interests? Is it the security of current or former colonial powers? Like, there is no clarity on what that means. So I think it's important when you talk about it that this is about peacekeeping. Even in the text of the bill, it's clearly not just about peacekeeping. That was one of the big things of the Defence Committee, was what does this mean? And we had no answers that came through. Also, just to add, and I think Jenny spoke so well about the Finance Committee report. It's actually a great report. I'm biased on the Finance Committee. But what's really interesting in it, and it's useful to have, the facts and figures we heard, 150 million in loans, 16 billion of which is going to Hungary. So if we were concerned about, Russia, why is the EU underwriting 116 billion in loans to Hungary, which is an authoritarian state increasingly? And cluster munitions are on the menu, because cluster munitions are being now produced and bought by European countries. And Yanis was completely right. This is actually also in the report where this money, so much of this collective EU money, 800 billion is the Parliament's fix, is routing through to the big manufacturers of countries. So it's our money that is going now to mainly countries, to the United States and to Germany, who are the big arms manufacturing countries. And that's pulling out of everyone. Just a really little example, because it makes it very real for people. We know it's coming out of social cohesion that built peace in the north and helped us build peace in the north. It's coming out of climate, which is the absolute ultimate genuine security risk that we are facing and feeling, and where we lost a decade before when we did nothing about it because of austerity, and we're now about to lose another 5 or 10 years because we're going to just focus on military expenditure. But it's also little things. The Natura project we've just been hearing about, those projects that help farmers right across the country, those schemes, the little payments that make a big difference to keep small farmers going, that's now going into a competitive fund, which includes military expenditure. So it could be drones instead of couriers. It's literally that specific where they're taking it. And I just wanted to say, so these points I think are really important when you're talking. The last thing I would just say is it feels when you speak to people and they're telling you, but we want to do something, and this kind of shame that there's attempt to create, I'm going to finish now, but the kind of attempt to create a kind of shame. Ireland should be proud, and we have led on disarmament previously. We have led on building peace. We have led on showing how you build peace. And crucially, this is really important, we could lead and should lead on showing how international law applies. If Ireland wanted to have courage, and it could be right now passing the Operating Terrorist Bill and supporting international law. If Ireland wanted to protect Europe, it could be stepping up and using its power as a digital regulator. These are actual concrete things for those who you talk to, because it is beginning to seep through. People feel there's threats. How you tackle those threats really matters, and the way Ireland can do it and should do it is with courage and not with a cowardly falling into line behind imperial powers. Thank you.
I think a lot of points that I wanted to raise are covered by the previous speaker. Thank you very much on the point of we're trading all of the investment that we've lost in this country through austerity. Spending on HSE hasn't recovered from 2008 levels. And yet we want now to additionally spend on military, we want to open that floodgate. And all we're doing is basically selling off our country, selling off our young people, selling off our talent to foreign military industrial complex companies. And I think that's something that will hit to people, that will hit to young people. If you know that there's no infrastructure, there's nothing developed for you, what is going to happen is your future will be sold for fear, for this protection of the EU, when the only way we can actually protect ourselves is not align ourselves with imperialism and be that kind of beacon of hope that I think the EU was at its foundation and is no longer. So thank you all today. This was a really great and positive way to spend an evening, and I hope we can continue this fight.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I just think Catherine Connolly was elected as our president, and I think that the parties that are here represented that wanted her to become president are present here today. I think that she should be asked very much to be involved in this campaign, and her voice will be listened to. So maybe spend some time with Catherine Connolly and ask her what she can do.
Thank you. Okay, 3 more hands and then we'll come back to the speakers. So yourself and then over there. Yeah. Here. And then you.
Hello. I got off my bus tonight in O'Connell Street and I was passing the Spire, and it brought back memories to me of Ensign in 1966 when they blew up Nelson's Pillar, the place was covered in debris. But on that time in 1966, I attended a class in Bolton Street College, and there was a respected academic giving a talk, and he told us that the European Union had as its goal to become a military and superpower, not just an economic community, as we were being told at the time, but a superpower. Now, the people in the class were aghast because it was all pro-Europe. But this guy shook his head, no. He says they want to be a superpower. Now China is going to be a superpower, he says. There's not many people who know anything would dispute that. Their economic system is far better, they're going to thrive. And all of us at the time thought we associated China with communism. The same way we associate Indians with lesser human beings and the greatest genocide ever was, but that's the way we were brought up. It was the cultural context. And I'll just fast forward. I spent some time in the United States, and I happened to go into a pub and have a pint, and I was sitting at the counter, and the BBC came in with a camera, and the television was switched on. And lo and behold, they came on and said that Charlie Haughey had declared that Ireland would be neutral in the Falklands War. And I was delighted, because great news. And I said to the friend of mine beside me, I said, would they mind if I said a few words and compliment Mr. Haughey? He was a great friend of mine and at the time, but anyway, I thought he was doing the right thing, you know. But anyway, he says, Mike, and he's actually, would you for God's sake shut up? You'll be lynched, he says, here to all expats. This is a British pub. That was all right. 4 people, sorry if I'm going on a bit, 4 people came in from the BBC, set up, in their new suits, ties, handed 4 pints, and they spoke complimentary about the Falklands War and all the British human rights, and left their pints back on the counter, untouched, and walked back out again. So much for British BBC independence. And the barmaid said to me, Mike, here, have a pint of Her Majesty's pleasure. Well, anyway, that was the last thing I wanted to say.
Sorry, do you mind if I cut you off? Because we have 2 more people who want to speak, and
I'll just say this in a cultural context.
okay, if you can speak up.
Lee Hallmark is going to appear in the United States with a bowl of shamrock. The bowl of shamrock represents Irish Catholicism. 3 persons, 1 God, God. He's going to hand it to a fellow who thinks he's God. And, you know, he should throw it over his head, but anyway.
Thank you.
I was going to say.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much to the panel, and I just wanted to, I suppose, ask a quick question, and it might sound a little bit silly to some people in this room, but I suppose I just wanted to kind of get behind Ireland doesn't seem like a particularly lucrative sector for military spending, given the size of the island, nor does it seem like a particularly important player in force projection or anything like that. So my question is, why or who are, or to just get behind, who is it that's so, what forces? Is it the EU? Is it the Americans, the Brits? Is it all of the above? Who's so bothered about getting Ireland to scrap its neutrality? And I suppose that's my question to the panel, really. And I just have one more little comment, was just the Russia dimension is such a red herring. It's Russia invaded Ukraine, therefore Ireland needs F-35s and all this stuff. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, silly government.
Thank you. And then 2 more speakers, if you just keep it brief as possible, and then we can go on.
Yeah, just very briefly. Look, I think the reason why there's such a barrage of propaganda from the Irish Times, the RTE and so on, is because they're frightened. They've seen the Catherine Condy victory, and therefore I think it's very important that people here go out with a sense of optimism that we can defeat the government. So I've only one simple proposal, which is that I think it's a very good idea having a protest with it all, but I do think there's a need to call a national demonstration from all over the country, because we've got to make a stand on this. So hopefully, whoever the incoming committee will set a date for that as soon as possible.
Just keep it really brief. Yeah, so Marnie and then Jane.
Just very quickly, I think the key thing is what Richard Wolff said, is Minneapolis has shown us the way forward to break the pessimism and break the feeling that you can't do anything. And actually, as Jenny said,
we need to get the movement on the streets. Nobody needs to be further convinced by the very, very good speeches as we had tonight, but the argument itself. This is about war or peace. It's about where you stand. Palestine has shown us that lots of people are behind us. We have to be a lot more visible, build the movement, and the next, we've got names, lots of names. People wanted to sign up, they were really enthusiastic. We have to build the movement on the streets. Outside the door first, build a demonstration, but in communities. The other thing that really is very important, we talk about by-elections and everything, but in communities, people have been acting on Palestine. We have to take the movement onto the streets. Minneapolis can do it in -20. We can do it in the pouring rain.
James, you still want to say something? Have you had it? No. Okay.
Yeah. Just on the issue about involving the president, I think there might be a slight problem there, but we can certainly involve the spirit of the election campaign. The first time I canvassed in 10 years, and I've never been so uplifted. It was a brilliant campaign, and a lot of the parties and independents who were involved in the Irish Neutrality League were involved in that. So both the spirit of Catherine Connolly and the spirit of James Connolly, let's take it forward onto the streets, outside the Dáil. I agree with the national protest. Let's get it done.
All right. So, okay, thank you to everybody who made a comment and asked a question. Before I come back to the speakers, I'm just going to do something, what you might call grassroots democracy. I think one of the things that's exciting about meetings like this, the size of the meeting, is it's a grassroots gathering, and I think we should make decisions collectively. So I'm just going to call out the proposals, and you can say yay or nay, and just so that we have agreement from the room about some of the proposals. So I'm just going to work backwards. So a protest about the triple lock when it's in the Dáil. Is everybody in favour of? Okay, thank you. And then a national demonstration that would bring people from all over the country. Okay, I think that's a majority. Then somebody suggested asking Catherine Connolly, maybe the RNL could write to Catherine Connolly. That might be it. Then the message that save the triple lock, save neutrality, and let the people decide. What do people think? Paul, can you clarify your let the people decide comment slogan?
For referendum?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what do people think about that?
Yes.
You don't think so?
I'm concerned that the media are so scaremongering. I'm a little afraid that people will believe the scaremongering and say, oh, we have to defend ourselves. It's only a concern. I would let it referendum, but I'd be afraid how it would turn out.
Okay, well maybe we will defer the slogans to the next meeting, just because we're running out of time. What do people think?
Just on that, on Halifax Instagram, everybody's going for a referendum.
Okay. Okay, so do we want to put this to a vote here then? Okay.
It is in the statement of the INL, the founding statement of the INL, vote for and have a referendum.
Okay.
We have a good record at referenda, so I think we
We
have a relatively good record at referenda. I think we can bring people with us on this one.
Okay. Okay.
What would the alternative be?
Well, the one thing is, I think that should be where it goes if they are succeeding in removing it. But right now, the situation is the triple lock is there. And in fact, it's also not only there, but it's also it already has the underpinning of the referendum where they promised it, because it was part of the solemn guarantee that was attached in previous. So we almost won a referendum previously, or a referendum at least gave that commitment already. So I think definitely if we're at the point where it's being inserted, then you can look for a referendum again, but I think we should also own the fact that they're breaking the promise of a previous referendum. I wouldn't want to imply, let's put it to people.
Okay,
you put it to the people already, and you promised this to the people already. So that's just It's just a
Okay.
little bit of a nuance now.
Okay, so the nuance in the discussion, I don't think can happen here tonight because we've run out of time. So it is in the founding statement of the INL, but maybe the discussion needs to move to another meeting, if that's okay with everybody. Yeah. So then the next proposal I had was focusing on constituency campaigns around, we're pressurising the independents specifically in advance of the Dáil vote. Okay. And then lots of letters to the Irish Times about fairness in the debate. And if everybody in this room could at least write a letter, that would be a start.
Sorry, can I just make a point on
Yes.
the letters to the Irish Times? It may also be useful to write to the other newspapers criticising the Irish Times imbalance. It just might be because the Irish Times will be lucky to get one printed, I'm sorry to say. They've got an agenda and it's clear. The others might do it.
Okay.
And local newspapers.
Well,
Free papers, the only non-government funded papers.
Meeting. And then the
Free
final-
papers are the only non-government
The
funded
final
papers.
proposal that I had was by-elections, something like a campaign pledge and making this an issue in the by-elections.
Yeah.
Okay, so general agreement. Okay, so I've noted all those proposals and we can talk about them again at our next meeting, which we'll send around an email. It'll probably be on Zoom. So thank you to our speakers for your patience, for waiting for your last words. So I'll just do it in the same order that we started off with. So Rory.
Maybe I'll just answer this question. So, what are the forces that are pushing this? I think there's, when you think about it internationally, first of all, there's the United States, there's the British state, there's the European Union, and they're all pushing very directly. And this is not a conspiracy, they're doing it in public. They're saying it in public. And that is both political figures from the governments of those bodies, as well as media commentators. After Catherine Connolly's election, there was about 8 articles in the British press in a week about Catherine Connolly as a threat to NATO. And the Irish people need to be, and this is suddenly the British, where and they had House of Lords committee. There was with Jock Stirrup, who was the former head of the British, amazingly called Jock Stirrup, former head of the British Army, was on Irish media. There was another guy called Chris Pratt, amazingly called Chris Pratt. He was also on RTE saying that the Irish have a lot to contribute to NATO, they're great fighters, and so on. So this is House of Lords committee flooding into the British media and into the Irish media, and the Irish Times and RTE picking it up and giving them airtime on RTE unchallenged. Right? So this brings us from the international actors to the domestic actors, right? And so we have appliant media following Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. We have all these hawkish academics and commentators that are flooding those institutions like the IDSA, which is this arms lobby group established in 2021 before the invasion of Ukraine, please note, as well as the IEA, which is just in North Georgia Street, is another vessel, think tank. And we're also seeing the growth of think tanks in Ireland. We have not a huge history of think tanks. They're growing in number and they're growing a bit more conservative and Atlanticist. One thing, we're seeing that pressure, someone mentioned the OTB. We've already seen very explicitly, that Irish foreign policy is limited, shaped and dictated to some extent by US pressure, right? And that has been so made explicit. It's not a conspiracy. You can look up what the ambassador said, what various elected representatives and members of the American government said. So that's in public. Imagine what's happening behind the scenes, right? And I think the broader structure to try and understand this. So why is the Irish government, despite that external pressure, why are they incentivizing it? Why are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael interested in this? Why are the business lobbies interested in this? Why are business think tanks? And this is because Ireland is an economic dependency of the United States. Our economy is based on foreign direct investment of US capital. And on the other side, the other pole of it is the EU governance. Right? So we're dependent on that capital, right? And we've seen how what's leveraged in the threat in the OTB is that American companies might withdraw, right? And that we need to see those American companies, particularly in the tech sector, as arms of American foreign policy, as they have always been, but very particularly when we have those tech companies sitting around cabinets, licking the ass of Donald Trump to try and get patronage to have influence in policy. And one of the things they want to do is stop the EU regulating tech companies, right? And that because EU is the center of tech. I mean, those people here, Paul's doing great work on this, right? So this is entangled together. And I think the decision on stopping this, I know Sarah's great, to stop. The government, and myself and two colleagues, Patrick Bresnan and Patrick Brody, have been doing some work on this. That the government is essentially trying to take the FDI model it has, particularly with the dependency on the tech sector, and not get rid of it, not step away from it, but to intensify it, and doing that in the light of this militarization. So they're militarizing FDI. And I agree, as you said, it's not a great place to do that. And as Richard Wolff talked about the US government being desperate, the Irish government are desperate. They're so vacuous of ideas, they're so vacuous of will, they're so determined not to pay in any heed to the people of Ireland, or act in any way that would defend our interests, or act in a way that would solve the real crises, that they're so wrapped up that we must do what America says. So they're basically trying to turn Ireland, spread data centers, because AI is the future, build in pipelines for American gas, make Ireland this infrastructural hub that will tie together the Atlantic Alliance. And we're constantly told, and I'll end this, that the NATO alliance, even Richard Wolff was saying, and I agree with largely much of what he said, that the NATO alliance is about to splinter. I disagree slightly on that. What we're seeing is the United States disciplining Europe. We're going to stop protecting you from Russia unless you give us 5% or you invest 5% in your military, so that we don't have to invest in your protection or your military. They want European countries to invest in the military to build it up in order to use that military to help the United States militarily contain China. They don't care about Russia. Russia is useful to discipline. It's useful to keep the Ukraine war going because it disciplines NATO. It doesn't get rid of NATO. We're being herded like sheep by the United States, including all this instability and madness in Greenland. It's all about disciplining us, right? And the head of NATO this week, Mark Rutte, who said about 3 months ago that you can have your welfare systems in Europe, you can keep on having that, but you better start learning Russian. Right? This week he said that if the European Union cannot, or Europe more broadly, because he's also speaking about Britain, NATO outside, without America, cannot defend itself, cannot have security independence. If it was going to do that, without America, it would need to increase 10% funding, not just in NATO countries, but all European countries, to build an independent nuclear deterrence. So it's better that we actually stay with America. Euronews today, Euronews, the official news channel of the European Union, had not one, but 2 stories, you can see it in the videos, about how Mark Rutte is on fire. Mark Rutte is brilliant, and this is the official news channel of the EU. Don't care what any of the hawkish commentators flooding the Irish Times and what they say. What are the European Union state channels saying? Well, it's like the BBC RTE. They're saying, Mark Rutte is right, we need to stick in NATO, and we need to pay more to do it. The amount of distraction from what is going on is unbelievable. And, I'll stop there.
I'll be very quick, but for the national demonstration, I do suggest that we try to get all of the sort of Palestine solidarity groups to participate. I know there are some people that believe that they can only do stuff on Palestine, but neutrality is a question of Palestine. So they have to come up. They decide not to come up, shame them, tell them Bana was a Palestinian, is shaming you to come out for the national demonstration. We need to have a really large number because it does help to show the number of people, and the slogan as well. I do support the slogan that let the people decide. I think that's a very powerful one. And if that's the one carried through the march, and if it's also used collaboratively within all of these different movements, including the Palestine movement, I think that national demonstration will be quite very powerful. Yeah.
I'm going to stand up just to show off how tall I am. But also, I can't help but throughout these discussions just feel the absurdity of it. No, I don't want to go to war. No, I don't believe that we need to pull up our big boy pants and get to work and behave. Because I'm not playing that game. We're not doing that. It is absolutely absurd that we are being gentle parented into a reality that this is the natural progression of things. It is bonkers. It is absolutely, it goes against our human nature. It goes because it has nothing to do with humanity. Because if humanity even entered the conversation, they'd have to stop looking at the money, they'd have to stop looking at their power, and have to actually reckon with the destruction that they represent and that they seek to uphold. We have to have a national demonstration. We have to put it to a vote. We have to come out and we have to go beyond that. We have so many infrastructures in place from the Palestine campaigns, from so many different campaigns, and we must utilize every single one of them. Because without our neutrality, what's the point of us fighting for anything? What's the point of us getting out and saying that things can be better? Because we stand, as we've heard tonight, we can stand for something better. And we can believe in something better. And now we just have to do it.
Okay, thank you everybody. As you're leaving, please leave us your contact details and donate to help us cover the cost of the room. And we will be having an activist meeting very soon. We'll email everybody with the details, and I think it'd be great if as many of you as possible could get involved, and we can start working on these great proposals that we've had here this evening, including a national demonstration, which takes a lot of work. So please do find some time in your busy diaries. And just to say thanks to Mida and Stephen and Deborah, who have the horrible and thankless job of trying to sort out the tech. And thanks to everybody who...
For signing people up online as well.
Oh yes. People, so if people online could also leave their email addresses, we'll get back to you as well. Okay, thanks everybody, and see you at the next event.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate everybody who came in. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very, very much. Peace.
I think